Geert, app modernization, that is a thing. And a lot of companies that I talk to pose this question. First on moving to the cloud, modernizing their apps, but also more on app level. Should we modernize our apps? Should we rebuild or should we refactor our application? And how do we decide? How do we make such a decision on where can we look at on what to do? And I thought, well, that is not a very easy question.
No, I think it's a great topic for another podcast episode.
Okay, shall we just do a brainstorm on this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Rebuild or refactor?
Rebuild or refactor?
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.
So Rene, when having these conversations about app modernization and rebuilding or refactoring apps, I think we should always start with the why. Why are we talking about this? Why are our companies thinking about rebuilding their complete application?
Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons. There has been some research as well, of course. On every topic there has been research. But I think the question usually starts with when companies already have a bigger legacy application that has been around for a number of years or maybe even tens of years. And in the business of now, things go so extremely fast. The frameworks and the technology changes. And with all these new questions and requirements of their customers, companies start looking at, okay, what can we do? So how can we build in, for example, AI in our application? Or how can we build this new feature because our competitor also has this feature? And then they dive a little bit deeper and come into, okay, but wow, building this feature takes a lot of time. It costs a lot of money. We cannot actually build this feature because we don't have the people anymore that understand this big legacy application enough to really dive deep into the core of these applications. So flexibility decreases. The UX is not up to date. New compliancy regulations. So all kinds of things that happen in the industry that have an impact on current applications. Yeah,
and then people have the vision of, we're currently using an old tech stack, and if we have to do everything in that tech stack, it's actually quite hard. But we might, if we would rebuild it from scratch again with a new technology, then we might have that flexibility and be able to lower the cost, etc.
Exactly, yeah. So, and I think that one of the interesting things is that in the title we already said it. Usually, the question that is asked is posed in a simple way. Should we rebuild the application or should we refactor it? Or maybe the third option, should we do nothing? Which is usually not a real option. But I think that is really suffering from what we call the framing effect in psychology. Is when you pose two options or three options to someone, that people stop thinking about, are there any other options?
They will start focusing on those two options.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. So then it's either rebuild or refactor. And then it becomes, in some cases, a very easy choice. Like, we are not going to completely rebuild the application. So then, the only thing we need to do or we can do is polish it and refactor it a bit and go along.
So what might other options be besides like rebuilding it from scratch, starting a new greenfield application, building all the features again that you already have in your application, or refactoring it, changing the current application that you have in such a way that things might become possible again? What would other options be besides that framing effect?
Yeah, well, I think when looking at cloud migration, we usually use the 5R model. And I think it's quite applicable also for modernizing application. So Refactor is one, where you, maybe upgrade to a new tech stack, maybe write some unit tests, maybe rewrite some of the classes, but nothing really, really, really big. Other companies just say, well, if you have an application that is used within a big user base, but there is no actual need for big new requirements. You can also just say, well, let's move it, rehost it. Let's move it to the cloud, for example, or move
maybe
it to
containerize
it, do something simple on infrastructure level to make it a bit faster or a bit cheaper. But essentially nothing needs to be changed. So let's keep it as this and maybe build something else next to it to fulfill a number of requirements. So rehost is another option. And then of course we have rebuild, that is like completely from scratch, which is quite a big undertake if you have a bigger application. But then I think what is also very, very common nowadays is, and people do not think about that much, is replace. Because there are so many new startups, there are so many companies that build best of breed products. So if you have a product that has been around for 20 years, probably there are 5 or 6 other products now in the market that are very modern, that can integrate with APIs, and maybe you can just replace the application or bits of the application by using common off-the-shelf products and integrating those products with a sort of middleware and not building everything yourself anymore.
Yeah, and especially, and we talked about this before, within your company you have things in your core and context. If it's something that really in your core of your business, then of course you want to focus on this yourself, you want to own it yourself. But there's also a lot of processes in the context of your organization that do you actually need your own ERP implementation or logistics?
Yeah, but also in your core, if you have an application that, for example, processes payments or sends invoices, there is tons of other products that do that very, very well, and you can also customize them a little bit. And maybe you can just replace bits of your application with common off-the-shelf products.
That was. I was also thinking about that when you were naming these different options. Do we actually have to choose one option, or can I go with a combination of them?
Yeah, probably you will, if you do it right. You will end up with some of the combination. So let me just finish the 5 R's model, because we also forgot one very important one, and that's retire. Is your product still feasible? Is it still something that you want to continue, or should you just say to your customer, sorry, we are going to retire this application?
Is it actually making money?
Is it actually making money? Because I think that there are a lot of companies that continue with their applications, but for the sake of continuation, but not so much in the sake of real business. So I think that those are the options. And I think that you're completely right. It's probably a combination of a number of these things that make a good solution for your question.
Yeah. So, okay, this question arises. We have an existing application that's been around for quite a while, maybe a decade, and we want to make it work for the future of our company. How do we make this decision? How do we go about? Any tips on that area?
Yeah, well, you can ask people. But you know what happens if you ask people, right?
Yeah. Well, it is the most common thing to do, right? Ask your tech leads, ask the developers who currently build it. They will have opinions on the old tech stack. If you ask a developer, do you want to work on this 10-year-old technology stack, or should we rebuild it with the newest, hippest tools that you can get? Well,
I think that you know the answer, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same goes for the other way around. If you ask senior management or leadership okay, do you want to rebuild and invest maybe 2 years of time and money to get something new, or do you want to continue your business and make money and add some features, although it's a bit slower, but still customers can still be happy.
But what they ask is like, okay, so what will I have in 1 year or in 2 years? And it's like, you will have the same thing as you have now, but it will be modern.
Yeah, exactly.
But from a business perspective, what does it do differently? Well, we hope it will have the same features, but for the first time when we start out, it will have only a couple of % of the features that our current application has, and that's always a really hard struggle, right?
Yeah.
I've seen these complete rebuild projects, and haven't seen that much success with it, because it's really hard to have a fully functional application on one side, and then on the other side we have the new application that does 10% of the things that the old application did.
Yeah, exactly. So I think asking people, of course you should ask people for their opinion, but you should also be very aware that people suffer from opinions based on previous experiences, based on just gut feeling, based on preference, tech preference, based on all kinds of biases that we are all programmed with, where you have the optimism bias, where we always think that the future is bright and that it always will be better. We have the sunken cost fallacy, that maybe leadership follow, like we cannot de-invest because we already pumped in so much money in the old stuff, so we cannot do it again because then we will lose all that money. So there is all kinds of also psychological biases that we have that makes a decision almost always emotional. If you just purely ask people for their opinion. So I think that we should dive a little bit deeper into more arguments on, and let's take these two extremes on first refactor and the other side rebuild. So let's explore a bit. Why should you rebuild an application, Geert?
Well, it could be that the tech stack that you're currently working on is so old that it becomes really hard to maintain or develop new features in. Maybe you don't even have the developers to maintain that old tech stack, because if you're still running let's say a COBOL application, where do you get new COBOL developers from? That's quite hard. So that could be reasons to really rebuild something from scratch. Maybe the business actually changed so much that the old application that you have now is actually not that fitting that well anymore. And maybe building it from scratch and goes in a different direction, and taking a lot of lessons learned would be a good fit, where you don't actually need all the features that are in your old application. But if you're completely building the same thing, then rebuilding is not often something that I would do, except for when your tech stack is really outdated, or when just the architecture or the security, for example, is unfixable. If it's beyond fixing, then you might need to rebuild, but then it often feels like that there's no other alternative anymore.
True. Yeah, so and on the other hand, rebuilding, but on the other hand, why should you not rebuild, or why should you choose refactor instead?
I think if it's possible to refactor, of course the cost and the risks are a lot lower, right? You already have something. Improving that will, most of the time, will be a lot cheaper to do. You don't start from scratch, so you don't have to wait for a number of months or years to get on par with the old situation. You start with the existing situation and then move from there. So yeah, often I think refactoring, you want to keep your business up and running, and you want to be able to also add new features for your consumers as soon as possible. So the time to market is often a lot faster when you basically go for the refactor route.
Yeah. Yeah, but still, I think it's great that we do this this little session, because again, with these two extremes, probably it will be a sort of combination.
Yeah.
Some parts maybe rebuilding, some parts it's new builds, sometimes it's refactoring, and sometimes it's even maybe replacing or retiring.
Yeah.
But still, even with all these outdated tech stack, extreme technical debt, all that stuff, it is really hard to make it real concrete. It's still quite subjective. Like, the tech debt is too high, or it's unfixable. That is more opinion. So I think that we should maybe dive a little bit more into, so how can we make a decision based on maybe other things? And I really like also looking from the business side of things, because it's great that we want to rebuild an application because then it's modern again. And from a technical perspective, and my technical heart is growing from that. But in the end, it's not the tech people that decide on an investment of multiple millions. It's usually a business decision. So I think that we should try and look a little bit more on the business side of things and try to quantify a number of these things.
Yeah.
So
do you have a model for this?
Yeah. So there is this simple model that says, okay, well, if you want to make a business decision, you can look at 3 dimensions. So the first dimension is cost. Yeah. So how can we maybe we should make the decision based on decreasing the cost aspect. The other one is decreasing the risk, and the other one is growing the revenue. And of course, if you make that decision, the growth in revenue should be bigger than the cost that you will make to actually rebuild or refactor your application.
Yeah.
Or if it's not a revenue thing, but maybe a cost thing, if you do a refactor or a rebuild, will the cost to operate your new application be higher than, lower than the cost to build it? And so in the end, so maybe in 5 years' time, your operating cost will decrease in such a way. They say, okay, then we will earn back our investment.
Yeah, and the risk side is somewhere in between, right? So you can calculate certain risks. Do you want to take certain risks, or do you want to decrease them, and they come with a certain cost?
If the risk is very probable that you will be hacked in 2 years' time, and that will cost you 5 million, then you have, are you willing to make an investment of 2 million instead of the risk? So I think that if we then dive a little bit into, so what does cost mean? Why is the cost of a product high, or how can we decrease cost? You hear a lot, features take a long time to build, maybe multiple weeks to build a feature because it's so complex and so hard to release, etc., etc. The run cost of an application, because it takes up lots of compute space or lots of expensive compute resources to actually run your application. Your bugs, every time that a bug is reported, rework needs to be done. How long does it take? Your customer satisfaction, will customers stay?
I like that how you state, like there's so much more to cost than just we need to build this, so that's so many hours times the money a development team would cost, and there's so much more involved.
Yes.
Instead of only doing the change itself, right? Also making it so that future changes will be easier, and all those kind of things.
And your release process, and your change process, and your bug process, and your support process, everything comes together with building that feature in a complex way, or in a more easier to understand way. And I think also in cost, how many people do you need to actually build and run your product? And what type of people? Are they very senior level developers because the code is so complex and so specific? Or is it more, common, a common language that is good findable in the market, like C#. There are lots of C# programmers. But if you want to find a COBOL programmer, then those are rare and expensive.
Because they are rare.
Exactly.
And how will the future look? Because these people will probably be quite old already. I think a lot of this stuff also ties down to we can change things now, but after that we also need to operate it for a longer time. Looking at applications that do have a positive business case, and I think tech debt also takes quite an important role in there, while it might not be that visible, especially for business. They don't see technical debt. It's really hard to explain why certain things should be changed while it's still working on the outside. If you just take a look at the application, everything is working.
Yes, and I think that if you go back to the beginning of this conversation, where the question is asked, should we rebuild or refactor? Usually you are talking about older applications, and we had a number of reasons why you should pose that question, or cost, agility, security, integration, all that stuff. And I think most of the reasons why these questions are asked is because of technical debt. Yeah. Because over time you just build up technical debt, whether you want it or not. And the more you let it linger, the more it grows. And
so could you say that if you really own your fixing your technical debt and really always be up to date with modern architecture and modern tech stack, that you never get this question of should we rebuild or refactor, because then you're on the ball all the time, so you know you don't have to take these large steps anymore. It's just an ongoing process.
I wouldn't say that you will never have this question, but I think the question will be far easier to answer, because the answer will probably be always, okay, refactor. Let's take
it should be easy.
a number of sprints to refactor this bit or to rewrite this bit. And because everything is up to date, everything is documented, everything is unit tested, everybody understands these bits, the tech stacks is understandable, that, well, the answer will never be rebuilt, because nobody understands it anymore, and nobody understands what is in here. But I think that the lower your technical debt is, the easier it is to build stuff on top of it. So
how would you quantify technical debt when we look at applications or organizations?
Yeah, if you type in technical debt quantify in Google, you will get like loads and loads of models. There are many different models. I like a model of Philip Proctor. He is a scientist, and he really did some calculations where he says, okay, there is invisible features, there is invisible depth, there is visible features on your backlog, and he has all kinds of formulas to really put a price on it. And it's really comparable with calculating interest over a loan that you have. And he has a nice calculation model, so look it up, Philip Proctor, and he has a nice calculation model on how to put value on the technical debt you have in your system. So that is a nice way, but personally I also think it is limited.
It's focusing on the really technical side of your application, and technical debt might have far more implications than that. For example, also like how does really old code affect the people that have to work with it on a daily basis, right? So can you hire new devs when you have a really old tech stack, or if you would be on a modern tech stack, would that make those things a lot easier?
Yeah, I think that the morale of development, that is
developer happiness,
developer happiness, developer experience, it is really, really important, and it's really hard to put a value on it. But it is something that is true, because if you're constantly under pressure and you have to work, and it takes really, really a long time to build something into your code base, and the productivity is low. Now the pressure increases, so you start to do all kinds of hacks and other routes. So the code quality goes lower again, and therefore it increases the technical debt. So pressure gets higher, and so it goes on and goes on, and eventually it leads to a low developer morale, and people will just leave because they say, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to work on something new and cool and greenfield, and something that I can actually contribute something, and not constantly chasing my own tail. So the model is nice, but I think you should consider a number of other things as well. And that's why we also need to take a look at other aspects here.
And I think it's one of those things is actually more into running your application and understanding the application as a developer. How we often see, like, building a certain feature takes a certain cognitive load, right? So let's build on feature A, we work on it, we put all our focus on feature A, then when it's finished we can start working on feature B, and we can put all our cognitive load on feature B. But that's not how it works in software, because these features do have interactions, for example. So after finishing one feature, building the second feature on top of that is actually, it increases the complexity of building that second feature. I really like a model that Eduardo Ferro Almanda created, and he calls this the basal cost of software. And how he describes this is, you should compare software to just any metabolic system. Like, you as a person, even if you don't do any exercise or movement, your body still uses a lot of energy. And that's the same for software. Even if you don't build any new features, you still need to put a lot of effort in keeping that application up and running, up to date with patches, etc., without adding new features. And when you add more and more features, the application as a whole becomes more complex, so also more complex to keep running.
Yeah, it's a really nice metaphor, I think, because it's also the bigger your system is, the more you need to understand as a developer on that system how things integrate, how things operate, communicate with each other. And I think that that whole idea of metabolic rate, that it always increases if you add features. And I think that if you have also technical depth in all these features, you need to the rate goes even higher. And at a certain point in time, you just don't have enough capacity to operate your system. And that, I think it's a really nice business case to also look at on, okay, how can we even add more features to it, or do we spend most of our time in bug fixing? And that is really something that you can quantify. How much tickets do you get? How much time does your team spend in building new stuff or maintaining old stuff? Well, that is just do a query on your support system and create work items where you do a category and you know how much time is spent on what. And it gives a good indicator on if you are doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. So I think the question rebuilding or refactor, I think that we already had a lot of arguments, like rebuilding is almost never a good option. I think that if you read the internet and see all the stories, of course, there are success stories as well, but most of the stories that of companies that really try to build completely something new, they failed.
And they asked this question too late.
Yes.
When it was not possible to take any other options anymore. I think refactoring, or at least partially refactoring, or maybe carving out certain pieces of the application is, well, eventually the way to go, right? Instead of seeing the application as a whole, refactoring or rebuilding pieces of it should be your way.
Slicing pieces away. I think the model of Martin Fowler, the strangler pattern, strangle your old application. So first build a layer on top of it, make sure that the layer communicates, then replace parts of the underlying systems, and then in that way create this new architecture of interconnected services. That is also what Gartner now says in the most recent research. You need to go chase a continuous modernization model, and that also builds on top of. If you constantly are on top of reducing your technical debt, it's easier to shift from building other features, and I think that it also ties into the whole hype cycle where now microservices is really into commonality.
Of course,
accepted in the industry. This is the way to go.
Everyone is doing microservices nowadays. Maybe not in the right way, but that's a whole different podcast episode, I guess. But at least moving to services that are autonomous, and have clear interfaces of communication with other areas, where also teams can only focus on that area of the application. So again, this basal cost of software, all the cognitive load of the whole application is lowered because you only need to focus on a certain piece of the application, a certain value stream that you can understand from beginning to end, and also can own from beginning to end.
And also can choose the right technology for the right service, because sometimes it's not effective to use C# with the SQL Server database for that specific thing, but you need to, choose another language, or maybe buy a system and write a simple integration layer on top of it. So I think that really ties into the operating model, right? Of how do you organize your company.
Yeah, I think it ties down to Conway's law. Is that what Conway's law says is eventually your application architecture is going to look like the communication patterns that you have within your company's departments. So if you set up your company in such a way that they are focused on individual value streams that each own their own piece of the business, then your application architecture can also will automatically follow that same pattern, making it a lot easier. And also asking this question about rebuild or refactor can be lowered to that level of the application. We can look at one value stream and see, should we refactor more in this value stream, or should we retire this whole value stream, or should we rebuild a new value stream? Those questions are easier to answer than when it's one big landscape that's fully intertwined with each other. So you only have one big question: do we completely rebuild this or refactor pieces out of it?
Well, I think it's a great summary of a lot of things, and I think again we can reach the conclusion that a technical question is never always a technical question. The rebuild or refactor is so much more than it. It's also a business question, but it's also an operating model question, like how do we organize our organization? What engineering culture do we implement? So again, I think a good episode where we hopefully fleshed down a number of these considerations, and really hope that you start thinking about if the question is posed, any question like with two options, stop and think and okay, am I framed here?
Or take a step back. Yeah.
Take a step back. Are there other options, and can I maybe combine options, because it's never ever a black and white thing.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up with this.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, thanks for the good talk.
Thank you.
And,
thanks for listening.
Yeah. To all the listeners, thanks for listening, and hope you listen again in 2 weeks for the new episode.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
The Lead Podcast, a podcast for leaders in engineering, architecture, and development.